Hey guys, welcome back. Are you in America going crazy over the Republican Party and what's going on with democracy? Well, if you're scared of what happens if maybe your country slides into fascism, even if you flirt with fascism for a little bit, well, today I want to link together a potential rise in American fascism, a Korean lunchbox, and apartment prices in Korea. So this is probably the modern version of the old school lunchbox. You can go to the Seoulite.com and I'll show you the tin that's like bronze colored, and it was not airtight like this, and it was the most delicious lunchbox which people still make today. It's very simple. It has rice and some grilled kimchi and some fake looking spam imitation, and either some black beans or anchovies, the little ones that sometimes are a little bit sweet here in Korea. And, you know, the kids would pile them up on the stove inside the classroom. And this was in the 60s and 70s. Now, 60s and 70s, Korea was officially declared a democracy, but it was living under a dictatorship. And so in the classroom, sort of like that potbelly stove, stories that you have in that one-room classroom, one-room schoolhouse in the United States. So they would wait until lunchtime. But here's where the romance of this story gets a little bit weird, and I just heard about this over the weekend. When you opened up your lunchbox, the teacher would come in and inspect it. Inspect your lunchbox. Why? There was a rice shortage. Rice production could not keep up with rice demand in Korea during that time. And so, in order to solve the problem, what did a dictatorship do? It wanted to limit rice consumption. And so it told the teachers to inspect all the kids' lunchboxes and make sure there was at least 30% non-white rice or non-rice elements in their rice. So, you know, you can mix in beans, you can mix in barley, and this is all trendy, great stuff, you know, like that quinoa and stuff like that people love to do now. But back then, it did not taste good. Now, we have those pressure rice cookers that even if you put in barley and beans and quinoa, it tastes better. But back then, it was not good. And it was something that people did not want to have. They wanted to have that delicious white rice. So if you had too much white rice, you'd be labeled as probably like some rich kid, you'd get in trouble. Imagine that. So then that could have been weaponized in any format, with the teacher being able to bully and pick on the students that he didn't like. And back then, you actually had to pay money to go to school. Back then, you actually had to give teachers gifts in order to win their favor. So this is just another avenue where you can really stick it to a child. Also, this immediately creates this system where you are comparing your stuff with another. See, this is a little bit weird, right? Because you're not judging people, like looking down on them for having barley in their rice. You're actually judging them if they don't have enough of barley, the yucky stuff, in their rice. You're basically saying, like, look, if I have to do this, you have to do this. If I have to suffer, you have to suffer. We're all going to suffer together, and I'm going to check yours to make sure you're suffering as much. And so this kind of creates this weird dichotomy in somebody's mind, because everybody just wants to have 100% delicious rice. When they leave school, the goal is to have 100% delicious rice. Even when they're in school, the goal was to have 100% delicious rice. It was just this artificial mandate put upon by a dictatorship to try to fix a rice problem by putting it onto the wrong people to solve the crisis in food production. So in order to really solve the problem, when you don't have enough rice, you do what they eventually did, was to focus on farm production and distribution, and probably increase trade for exports and imports, and figure out how to feed your country with actual rice, and not take it away from people who worked really hard to, feed themselves. White rice may sound so boring to you Americans, but to Korean people in that era especially, it was like looking at a mound of sugar. It was probably like one of the only things that you could really look forward to, and it was just a source of joy because it essentially is like sugar. It absorbs quickly, it sends the glucose right into your brain. It was something that was highly esteemed, and you were trying to make it a source of shame. Okay, so how does this relate now to apartment prices? Well, these same kids who were inspecting each other's rice kernels are now the middle-aged people, the baby boomers of Korea's generation, who are setting government policy and are the main real estate holders and buyers. So 50, 60, 70, maybe early 70-year-olds right now. And what they're doing is trying to tame down apartment prices by what I consider looking in other people's lunchboxes. It has been a problem that real estate in Korea has gone way out of the reach of normal people. Over 95% of young people want to buy a home. They cite retirement as one of the main reasons. A house in Korea creates stability, especially when you do not have a strong welfare system, not a strong retirement system, and not a lot of secure and asset-backed investments, not to mention income opportunities. So there's way too many things tied up in real estate. And not only that, apartments, out of all the real estate options, apartments. So you have a flood of people just looking into one sliver of one type of asset class. And when the Moon administration came into office, they pledged to try to solve this issue. Their solution was to get people who have more than one apartment to give up their non-residential apartment and put it out on the market in order to increase supply and perhaps drive down the price. How would they do this? They would make the property tax way burdensome by making it jump to a level where you probably could not afford it, especially if you were a retiree. So let's go over some specific numbers just to illustrate this point. So Korea's taxation is a little bit complicated when it comes to real estate. Essentially, as you move up the income ladder, there's a percentage that goes up, and when you move up asset values, the percentage goes up, and there is also percentages that also can get tacked on if you have multiple real estate holdings and if you hold real estate holdings in a highly speculative zone that's been, a really hot area. So essentially you can kind of think of it as before about 0.6 to 3.2%, and now it's going to go up to 1.2% to about 6% of property taxes per year. And so this was done intentionally, not to try to create a situation where you're just matching inflation or just increasing the government's take legitimately. They really did do this to impel people to sell. Their goal was to do it in 2 phases, so they already raised it in stage 1, and stage 2 is going to come this June. And so back in January, there were some discussions on modifying it a bit or to delay it a bit, but they said, no, we need to lower apartment prices, so we're going to go forward with it. We predict that a lot of people are just going to start selling their apartments and put it out on the market, and therefore we're going to have a lot more access to real estate for ordinary people to buy. What happened? Prices went through the roof, especially in those speculative areas. Right now, in those speculative areas, it has reached a point where one pyeong, which is essentially 36 square feet, has reached about $100,000 or 1억. And that's basically, when you look at a hotel room, that's about 360 square feet. So 36 square feet is 100,000. So multiply by 10, that's $1 million. So essentially a hotel room would be about $1 million. So that's how crazy real estate has gotten in a lot of these hot zones. So after President Moon took office, real estate prices went up 58%. And a lot of people have been really upset by this because it has crushed a lot of their dreams about home ownership. And then people who have homes are really worried that they're going to lose their source of security. Like I said before, the home represents a source of income, an investment, and also retirement security. Because in Korea, those things are lacking in other avenues. Not only that, this policy has one fatal flaw. Even if a lot of people had said, you know what, screw it, I don't want to pay all these taxes, I'm just going to sell my apartment now, and maybe even take a hit if the prices go down because there's so much supply, which didn't happen. But even if that had happened, the prices are so high that ordinary people cannot have the capital to buy this apartment outright. They'd have to take a loan. But the government, trying to tamp down on the price increases, had told the banks that they have a limit on how much money that they can loan people who buy houses. And so in Korea, generally, you have to have at least about 40 to 60% down payment for a house. So if it's $1 million house, you have to have at least $400,000 to $600,000, and then you can borrow the rest. So that's not going to be a possibility for most normal people, the people that you're trying to serve by this. So the people who are so-called the dirt spoons, because, you know, we have like this saying in Korea, the golden spoon and the dirt spoon, are actually getting access to this capital last. And like the golden spoons, meanwhile, can get money like no matter what at like 0.5%. I think what the policymakers, and I bring it back to the 70s, I think they might not have gotten the memo that we moved off the gold standard and now we're in a world where we print money. And we print money and we give the money to the rich people first. They get to spend the money first when it has the most value, and then it eventually trickles down to the normal people who, if they have to borrow it at higher interest rates. So you're doing exact opposite. If you have all of these apartments that get released onto the market, the people who cannot afford it and cannot get the loans won't be able to buy it. Who can buy it? People with a lot of cash who see their cash value going down, they want to buy assets, and people who have cash and access to credit. So basically the 1%. So you're basically releasing, I would say 0.1% actually, you're releasing the supply from probably the top 10%, like maybe the upper middle class of Korea, and then you're transferring this wealth up. You're not transferring it down, you're transferring it up to the 0.1%, and they're going to be able to own even more property. So instead of trying to get more people to have 30% barley, you're actually going to have the rich kid who's always had white rice the whole time and just hid it under maybe a layer of barley to have even more white rice. Maybe even sell you a little bit more white rice and charge you more for it because the prices have all gone up. All right, so what are some solutions to this lunchbox mindset? I think that's the first key to get out of the lunchbox mindset. We have to first acknowledge that this policy is made more from emotion and more from comparing yourself to others rather than from strict economics. If you can make an economic argument to me, like why this would actually work, please do, because I don't see the economic argument. When you want to create a situation where you want to solve a housing shortage problem, you need to create more supply, not take it from the people who already have it. That is just trying to reallocate, but it's just going to go to the more powerful people anyway. Again, reason why I'm bringing this dictatorship up, this is the mindset. And believe me, yes, I'm a little bit more on the left, but I hate everybody. So this is what happens when the left-leaning people are brought up under a dictatorship. They have no compunction whatsoever to feel like they can tax in order to compel people to force them to sell their houses. And then the rich people who grew up under dictatorship, who have that mindset, have no compunction to just gobble things up and keep abusing society and say nothing about it. So this is 2021, when we are long past a dictatorship and when we are in beautiful, glorious, modern Korea. But this mindset still lingers. This is a traumatic experience from childhood. So you do not want to let fascism ever enter into your society, because you are going to be paying the price decades later, because you can't really change people's mindsets. People act in groups based on what they learn together. Anyhow, so what can we do? What can we do to perhaps amend this problem a little bit? Well, first, I would say fix the credit situation. If you really want to create policies that control capital, then why don't you let capital move towards the so-called dirt spoons first before the golden spoons? Right now, if you are a golden spoon, you can access capital like it's water. You can just turn on a tap and it comes at a very low interest rate. And they get to borrow the money at a cheap interest rate, and they're just buying up assets. You can't compete against a worldwide monetary system that is just printing money like crazy and then going around trying to buy assets. So I would say that if Korea wants ordinary people to be able to buy assets, then it allows people to have access to capital in order to buy those assets. Number two, I think we really need to diversify the housing market in terms of what is a desirable investment. So, for example, right now, a villa in Korea essentially can mean an extremely wealthy person's house, like a head of a conglomerate that's like a mansion, or a unit in like maybe a 4-story building that is like dilapidated and running down. People hate to live in villas. I mean, unless you're like, you know, the chairman of Samsung and you have a different villa. But because they are taxed at 4% a year, so that already, just from that policy, creates a discrimination against villas and keeps the prices from not appreciating as much, because nobody wants the prices to appreciate that much, because your taxes are based on the price. So 4% of this much is affordable. 4%, as if it keeps going up, you can't afford to live in your house. And so there's not a lot of investments in the villa. Nobody wants to live in the villa. And there's even now discrimination. Like, kids won't play with other kids who live in a villa. That's how bad it's gotten. And now everybody's chasing after just the same little sliver, like I said, the apartment in a huge complex within the real estate asset class. So I think we need to diversify a lot more. Relax some of the rules, especially like the higher taxation rates, especially like on office tels, villas, and any other kind of real estate properties that are already in existence. We already have the supply. So try to make it less discriminatory and more desirable for people to invest in. Third, we have to reduce the dependency on real estate to solve so many social functions. Like I said, it is your retirement plan. It's your investment plan. It's your short-term income plan. That's a lot for one thing to carry. And the fact that you want to take that away from somebody, there's going to be blood on the streets. When you take away a man's ability to feed himself, it's like Dave Chappelle said, It's like murdering him. But he witnesses his own death, and he's alive afterwards. What do you think he's gonna do? So, we really have to find ways, if you're going to be a government policymaker, to create other avenues of investment, other avenues to increase people's income, other avenues to create a more stable retirement that does not depend on real estate. Otherwise, people are going to continue to invest in something they trust. And, I mean, let's face it, real estate is probably like one of the last places, especially in Korea, that people can trust. It's an asset that is backed by a physical product. It has transparency, and it has a very accessible value. Alright, so that's how you get from dictatorship to apartment prices in Korea, and a warning for all of you in America to never let fascism win. Alright guys, until next time, join us again. Don't forget to subscribe, and also go to thesoulite.com for lots more fun stuff. Bye.
Tune in next time. Don't forget to subscribe. Find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Love you.